Okay, we'll bring the May 2nd City Council work meeting to order. Is there a motion on tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion? Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Item 3, Ice Arena Management Report. Jack.
The current Ice Arena management contract with Gibson Management Corporation became effective on August 1st, 2021 for a term of 3 years. The city has utilized Gibson Management since 2008 for the management and operation of the city ice arena. In the past several months, the city has received several complaints regarding the cleanliness of the facility, communications concerning scheduling with Gibson Management, concession operations, and attention to daily maintenance items. These items have been presented to Gibson Management city staff, but these matters have not been entirely satisfied at this time. Due to these complaints, city council members requested and were given individual tours of the arena. As a result of their inspection of the facility, they directed staff to examine ways to correct these problems, including but not limited to consideration of contract modifications and/or proposals for a different management plan. Staff has met with the primary users of the facility, St. Francis High School and the St. Francis Youth Hockey Association, to discuss these concerns and outlined actions to correct these issues. Staff also met with Gibson Management to review these things and received a report from him explaining some of the issues that he had had over the years, over this past year regarding the operation of the arena. The general options for the management of the arena within the current contract would include, and I'm going to amend the recommendation that I made here, due to some conversations I had this afternoon, would be to continue the existing contract with Gibson Management, but with a final notice to Gibson Management that any unmet performance obligations would result in commitment of the process of contract termination. It would do neither party any good, nor the users of the facility for the ice time to have the contract canceled in the middle of the season. Other options that could be reviewed if the contract with GMC were canceled are transference of the operation and management of the facility to the city, lease of the facility to St. Francis Youth Hockey Association, or solicit requests for proposals for a similar management agreement with a private contractor, or ultimately the sale of the facility, which would be a worst-case scenario and is not really under consideration at this time. Whatever council does, I think that we would need to resolve this matter by May 23rd and be either in or out with Mr. Gibson. Staff recommends that City Council provide directions to staff as to the management operation for the arena for the 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024 contract years. Also provided, as requested by council, was an estimated cost of what it would take if the city were to run the operation. That's included as an attachment in your packet. And based on those, the cost of the city operating that facility were estimated to be approximately $96,000. We looked at this and discussed the hours on it, and some of these things are really undetermined. We'll probably take a year really to figure out what some of the hours would be. There's also a contingency in here too. It was 15% of what the costs were. So it could be less, but it also could be more too. The biggest disadvantage of the city taking the operation of the arena are the same things that Mr. Gibson claimed he had, and that would be to staff the facility with part-timers, finding qualified workers to do and perform the maintenance activities in the arena.
You earlier mentioned that you were going to revise your recommendation.
Yes.
What was your original recommendation?
The original recommendation was to continue with Gibson, but to have a cancellation clause in that.
Okay.
And with the discussions I had this afternoon, I don't think that's an option. And I think if we want to discuss a different operations management, we need to have that probably in consultation with the city attorney to see what we can do going forward with a different approach.
And so your recommendation is now, you're just withdrawing the recommendation?
My recommendation is that we continue with Gibson, but we notify him that any unfulfilled obligations of his contract will start a cancellation process. And also too, that in this, that we will, if this is the direction we wish to proceed, the city will monitor the activities of the arena very closely. We will have people there doing inspections. We will provide a clear method of where complaints should be sent to so they can be addressed immediately, and those things taken care of. I think that's some of the issues we've had in the past, even though we've had legitimate complaints, sometimes they aren't received in a timely manner. I think if they were, then we can head off any problems, but I think going forward, at least for this year, for now, that we'd be best going and retaining the contract with Gibson.
And what was the significance of the May 23rd date you mentioned?
Well, if we're gonna do anything, ice will be put in about 3 months, so it's a method of timeliness. So if we were to go ahead and do it, then we would have to start finding staff to run the facility.
Okay.
And I think it's of an essence that we act on this as soon as possible.
Okay, discussion.
What is Gibson, where do they stand on this? You two have at least had discussion with Gibson. Does he sound like he wants to keep this contract? Does he sound like he's interested?
No, he definitely sounds like he's interested. And Tim was with us when we had the meeting, and, you know, he said his biggest problem last year was staffing. Of course, I understand that, but, you know, that's his problem. We've all had some staffing issues, everybody has, with COVID and tight labor markets and things of that nature, but he definitely did want to continue, and I think he's been notified to the point that he understands that this is a very serious situation, and we are expecting him to fulfill his contract to the letter.
Is there a way to punish him monetarily for not fulfilling the contract, or is that too arbitrary to pin down?
I don't know, probably the only thing that we could do is if we had to go in there actually and do something, you know, we might be able to back charge him for our cost, but that could be a consideration to a contract amendment, but I would think at that time we would be at the point of cancellation, though.
Well, I'm thinking of things like the Zamboni. I mean, those were as simple as not plugging them in or not paying attention.
Well, that could be a thing that we could do to propose an amendment that, you know, any damage to any city-owned equipment that was due to poor or improper
Negligence.
maintenance could be his responsibility.
Well, I mean, on the Zamboni, perhaps that is something that the city should be taking responsibility for, making sure it's maintained, so. Because it's just not worth the risk of having a subcontractor doing that.
And
No,
if we're gonna have to check it
I
anyway,
agree.
check the arena
Well, yeah.
anyway.
Because of the last two incidents, you gotta check them batteries.
Yeah.
They're about $6,000-7,000 for batteries, so
Yeah.
you're gonna have to check them batteries before you start up this next year.
But that's, I'm saying is.
Yeah, well, the city, we could do that, yeah.
So what were the last two incidents you just mentioned?
The smoking, the Zamboni started to smoke, and what we figured out, they were low, the batteries were low on water. That's what they were kinda, twice on a Thursday night.
Well, it wasn't charged, there was no water in the
There
battery.
was no water in the battery, so, and that's, you know, you should be checking that stuff every time or every other time you use that Zamboni, so.
Absolutely.
With our meeting with Todd, he had stated he's gonna set up a schedule for inspection of that, because they're the guys running that machine, so they're supposed to check that before they operate. I don't think they had that set up properly.
Yeah, because I don't, I don't think those, those
The
two
kids
young,
may not have known.
no, those two young guys didn't, I don't think they knew Nate
That's-
that Thursday and
that's
Friday.
on-
I don't think they
that's
had a
on them
clue,
to be
so.
able to check that before they
Yeah.
get on it and operate. Check the oil on your car before you use it, that kind of thing, same setup.
Yeah, and then whatever, grease that auger, if there's any greasing on that auger, and,
Out of curiosity, if we started the hiring process for our seasonal workers yet?
Yes.
What's been the response?
We've had one, so we approved the two that were gonna come back at one of the council meetings, but one of those dropped out for a higher paying job. So I have one, previous employee coming back, and I've got one more application, and that's all we've had so far.
You got
So
one
that's
application.
Three total?
One new one, two existing, but one existing dropped out, so we only
Alright.
have two right now.
And was it 16 an hour? Is that what it
It's
was?
14.
14.
Yeah.
I just asked from the aspect of, I mean, Gibson hiring staff, and if the city was to take this over, we gotta hire the seasonal staff.
That's gonna be an
And
issue.
if we have a hard time filling 3 summer positions, or 2 summer positions, only get 3 applicants, it's not gonna get much better for, especially when we only pay enough, we only pay like Burger King pays now,
Yeah.
so it's hard to compete, so.
Would the hockey associations have any people that would be interested in working part-time?
I don't know, that could be mentioned to see if there was any interest in that. And they certainly would be, we could certainly pass that along to Todd or whoever's running the facility.
Don't most of those parents travel though with that team, those teams, and they're not in the same arena?
Yeah, but there could be other teens, older teens that,
Oh, in the
Yeah.
family that
Yeah.
don't play
I
hockey?
think one or two Gibson's employees, I thought they were hockey players too.
Yeah.
They are.
just one avenue.
you know, I'd like to piggyback a little bit what Brian said about that youth hockey too. If we do with Gibson is get them on board with, if there's a problem, get with somebody right away. Don't push it off. I think that's what happened, that things got pushed off. That's why it got so bad
Well,
over there.
And that's gonna be, that would be part of our educational process with youth hockey, is to meet with them before the season, make sure that they're aware of what the protocol is for submitting a complaint, and reinforce to them that those things need to be done in a timely manner, then we can respond to them. And also put some signage up in the arena, you know, if there's a complaint, here's who you contact. And the other thing we talked to Todd about too was making sure if he continues this, that his employees are easily identifiable. You know, they're gonna be wearing probably a yellow vest or some type of shirt or caps that identifies them as arena staff. So that if somebody has an issue, they can spot them very quickly.
Well, I think too, it'd probably be worthwhile, no matter what route we take on the management, is somehow improve the ability for the users to communicate their complaints. And obviously, first they should be right to the staff that are there, but if things aren't getting done, that they have another option,
Yeah.
you know, whether somehow connected to the city, so we hear about it right away. Because I think that's a big part of the problem we had here is there were a lot of complaints, they just weren't getting to the right people, and it wasn't until they started
Yeah.
contacting council that things got serious, so.
So, my only thing is with Gibson is, I think, as I mentioned before, I think this ice arena can be used for more than just hockey games. I had a resident, complain to me that residents, rarely get to use it, to pay to use it, to reserve it, because high schools have priority or something, but they don't set the schedule. Like this resident said, well, when is it available? And they wouldn't rent it out to them. So, and if the city is gonna pay for, maintenance and other things in this, ice arena, it should benefit the whole city, not just hockey players. You know what I mean?
What did they want to rent it for out of curiosity?
They wanted to do skating and go skating and play hockey in there.
Well, so they're looking for ice time.
Oh, they're looking for ice
Well,
time. There is no ice time, is there?
Not in the summer, there's not, no.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
no, but in the,
You gotta remember the cost too, it costs
Yeah.
a lot more money to.
Well, and
cool
there's a
that building.
scheduling, there's
If you-
there's a way to schedule.
Yeah,
right?
there's a link on the website to the schedule and the availability of that and who to contact for rental time.
During the year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they said they called and they were denied. So that's all I can tell.
Well, it could be scheduled, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of hockey is already scheduled. I mean,
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, and I understand that, but if this resident, and I only had this one side of the story, so that's kind of why I'm bringing it up. But if that resident thought that they were just totally being denied, saying they weren't going to, and that was their, opinion's not the word, what they understood was being said to them, which there may have been an error in communication. But from whoever she talked to,
yeah, I wonder who she talked to.
Well, Nate, do you get to see their schedule?
No,
You don't see it at all?
Gibson handles all the scheduling.
Okay,
But you can look at the schedule. It's on, there's a link on
It's
the
online.
website.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We don't,
so it
we don't
says
set
when
it.
there's open
Yes.
ice time.
well, and they have to rent, they have to pay
Yeah.
for the ice time.
Right,
Yeah.
oh, they understood that,
Okay.
they said rent, but it's inside, cause they said they were able to use outside ice rink, and they wanted the inside.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
outside's always open if it's ice is good for free.
Okay. Okay,
But on the dry floor events, that's the one thing over the years we've always tried, and it's just, the availability is there, but it's
Just
a
gonna-
unheated or uncooled building, and it's
Yep.
tough.
It's a marketing challenge, and I'm sure if somebody had the energy and the time to work it, they could probably attract a few more events there, but it would take a lot of work. And, we've looked at everything. We haven't checked it recently. We were checking on trying to get a farmer's market established there. And at the time, this was when Stephanie worked on that when she was here before, and we were told there was just not a big demand up this way for that type of activity. And you look at the farmers markets that are around here, and I'm talking particularly about Cambridge and Isani, and they're just basically fruit stands is what they are. They're not big events. And the gun show was there for a number of years. It finally ceased to use the facility, and I'm not exactly sure if they weren't making any money or if there were a change somehow in gun law sales for these private shows. The only other activity that we've had there was the Lions Club garage sale, which we more or less just made the space available for them.
It was hot in there.
There was a concert there one
Yeah.
time.
And there was
Gun show?
a circus there at one
Yeah,
time.
the circus
a long-
used to come, yeah,
A long
for
time
us.
ago.
That was actually probably the biggest use was the circus, that
Yeah.
was like 3 days, so.
But, you don't see circuses anymore, or a lot of those activities that used to use them are no longer in vogue, or they're no longer popular. But, until you have somebody that can actively market that and work to try to get somebody to come in and rent that space for dry floor activities, it's gonna be very difficult to get someone in there.
yeah, that's what, I think our area is getting to be more, interested in things like, vendor shows and farmers markets that have not just fruit stands, but multiple vendors. Out in Zimmerman, where I go for a vendor show, she had one last weekend, 150 different vendors were gonna be there. It's her yard. She charges $75 a vendor. That's $10,000 a month she's making, charging vendors $75 to set up and sell stuff.
Was that for a craft show?
It's a, it's a craft and vendor
Yeah,
show, yeah, because you have crafters, you have direct sales, you have jellies, you have food
Yeah.
trucks there, you know.
But that's an outside event though.
Right, but if you skip July and August, the two hottest months, Minnesota doesn't get that hot in April, May, June, September, and October, when they're not doing the ice thing, and you could do it once a month and get $10,000 a month.
Well, the ice goes in September.
Yeah, it's probably gonna go in a little bit later this year, but probably maybe by the 1st of October, but, now, the weather is very fickle. I don't know if you remember last year, from the last week of May till the first week in July, it was in the 90s almost every day. We had a drought, and it was miserable. It was humid. I think that you have more chance of getting the outside craft show type things. Inside, there's really not, when you start setting events up like that, there's not a lot of room, because you've only got the rink itself. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's just gonna take a lot of work and somebody doing a lot of legwork to try to convince somebody to have an event there.
Yeah.
And it'd be somewhat limited unless you had a lot of it outside. And I agree, it would
But
be,
there's room outside to
oh,
set
yeah,
tents and
there's
people out
a
there.
lot of room outside.
You could put, I don't know.
Have we gotten a price on what it'd take to cool the building? Put an AC unit in?
No, we're afraid to.
That's
No.
where,
Not-
that's where
it's not
the
AC unit we need.
sponsored,
Yeah,
that's where the sponsored arena comes from.
Yeah.
We find somebody to sponsor the arena, put ice in it, put air conditioning in it, and
yeah,
And re-insulate the entire building.
yeah, the big thing about that is the high ceiling in there. Most of the other arenas around here, I won't say most, but a lot of them are low ceilinged arenas. They're a lot cheaper to cool and take less electricity to use in the wintertime. They keep the chillers and the ice frozen. You know, ours from top to bottom is probably close to 36 feet?
It's
40 feet?
40-some feet in the center.
Yeah,
There's no ductwork or anything in that main area either, it's just the radiant heaters over the bleachers, it's only HVAC in that whole area that's installed, so. There's no heat in there.
Well, I just wonder
Yeah.
if, whether the cost of putting it in would justify,
Generate in the summertime.
because if the arena's essentially, I won't call it useless, but if vendors are uninterested, I'll say uninterested in using it because of that heat problem, then, you know, if we could somehow get it rented out just as much through the summer as, well, it wouldn't be just as much with the, having the ice in there, but, you know, if we could have get it rented out every weekend, I just wonder what if that would pay for putting the AC unit in.
kind of, just to give an example, I think when we charge a lot less for dry floor events, I think when the gun show was there, we charged them $600 a day for rental. So they were there set up, I believe, for 2 days, so $1,200 if you had, let's say you had 15 shows in the summer and got the same rate, that'd be $18,000. I think it'd probably take a long time to pay off what.
Recoup that.
Yeah. Because our rate for the ice rentals is $192 an hour, which is considerably cheaper than several of the other arenas around us. Isani charges $230 an hour. So we haven't raised our ice rental rates now in probably 8 or 9 years. We've tried to keep those stable, so it's still as affordable as possible, so we can not drive some people away that couldn't afford some of the extra fees. But that's another thing we may have to look at some point in the future.
Yeah, I don't know what we gain by focusing on trying to improve the dry floor vents for revenue or use, because that's not the problem we have at hand. The problem we have at hand is the
Yeah.
operation and
It's part of management, that's why I bought it.
and management, but the fact that we don't have tri-floor vents doesn't really affect anything. I mean, we gotta keep in mind that, this has been in the black for a number of years, so it's staying above water, so that's not really been the issue. The issue's just been the
Yeah.
quality of the product that's been provided with the arena, so I think we need to focus on that. I guess I'm of the preference right now to continue to try to work Gibson and to remedy these issues and find some permanent changes that'll give us a better assurance of maintaining the quality and the cleanliness and keeping the users happy, so.
One of-
Because if we do switch, it's a monumental switch, so it comes down to it.
Some of the things that we mentioned before, and we will have a presentation or an agenda item for the next council meeting that will outline the 2022 projects that we hope to get done before the ice season starts.
Yep.
It'll involve the painting of the interior of the arena, some work on replacing some of the rubber flooring, and doing fixture and updating of the restrooms.
Okay.
So we'll have those, and we'll also have the plans for what the Youth Hockey Association proposes to spend with the money they made on their fundraiser.
So I have a question. Currently, there's nothing in the contract that allows for a termination clause in there? Because every contract, I didn't see one, but I'm like, all the other contracts that I've seen that came
Well,
through us did.
There is, but it's a breach of contract clause. So the way that contract is written, if there's an issue and the vendor is notified that there's a problem, they have 10 days to correct it. If not, then they can be classified as breach of contract. So that would be the method of cancellation, is we'd have to show and definitely prove that there is a breach of contract.
So you don't think what we've experienced is a breach of contract?
Oh, I think it could be done, but the question is, do we want to do it, or do we want to go ahead and say, okay, here it is, this is the last bite of the apple, and we're gonna monitor this very closely to assure that you meet these expectations of the contract.
And then what happens if they walk out on November 1st? And we have no one then for ice for the season?
If they walk out on November 1st, then we do have a plan B, and then that's the city just steps in and takes it over. And we do have some experienced personnel that could take care of that. Now, there would be some hiccups and some transitions to make during that period. One of the biggest things would be the scheduling and coordination of things. There'd have to be somebody here that would handle that, but if the contractor was to leave, then we do have a means of continuing the operation of the facility.
And that would be temporary because you would put out an RFP.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that would be when we would discover them not doing their jobs,
Yeah.
would be about November 1st. If the ice is gonna go in October and they start commencing.
Yeah, generally it'd probably be December the
December
1st,
1st.
because a lot of I don't think most of the hockey season starts till November, does it, Nate?
Yeah, it's like mid to late October is when
Yeah.
the varsity teams are practicing and stuff, so.
And that's practice. Games are starting in November, so it would be somewhere around December that we would find that out. Or that the complaints would outnumber their attempts to correct them.
Do we need a motion on this?
No, we need,
Can't.
no,
Just direction.
yeah.
Correction?
Jack, you've had discussions or rumblings about other potential management options? Are any of those panning out at all as options, or?
The only one, the St. Francis, leasing to St. Francis Youth Hockey has always been a conversation, but I don't think it's ever gonna become a reality. They've indicated at times where they'd like to do it. I don't even know that would be the best option either. I think if we can't find a contractor, then their second best option would be the city to take it over on an interim basis till we could find another contractor. You know, the fact that we do have experienced personnel that could operate the facility is certainly an asset that we have in our back pocket, and wouldn't leave us high and dry should the contractor leave or the contract be voided.
Well, except we would still be in the same situation Gibson is of not having staff to, we
Well,
may have staff that can manage it and operate and have that experience, but not to be there for hours every
Yeah.
night,
Nights and weekends.
do
Yeah.
everything, nights and weekends.
probably what we'd have to do is just kind of shuffle our existing staff and maybe hope to pick up a couple of Gibson's employees, or maybe find a few that we could do. It would be a transition that wouldn't be smooth, but we could keep the facility open.
The last time we had these kind of discussions with Gibson, we ended up developing kind of a remedial plan with him. You know, remember the list.
Yeah.
It was like 20 items, and then within a certain amount of time, he completed it all. So is that the path we're going down to Gibson, creating a natural plan
Yes,
for him
we have
with
some of that.
dates and things?
We have some of that already under development now.
Okay. Well, my recommendation is that we continue our best to work with Gibson to get the issues resolved and find that path to remediate these issues, because every other path we take is gonna be significantly more difficult than retaining the contractor we have right now. That's, to me, that's a given, so, it's not, you know, and I think it seems to me that there's ways that we're gonna, you know, recover from that and get these items fixed with Gibson. But I think, you know, depends how things go in the next month with him and see how this shapes up, and if by the end, you know, end of May or last meeting in May, if that's the target you want is May 23rd, then we make a decision then, so it's 3 weeks to get this in a plan, not to get necessarily resolved, but at least know how it's gonna be fixed, so. That's my suggestion, council.
How many of the things have been fixed? Is the bathroom all cleaned up now and,
That has, no one's in there right now, so we're kinda in waiting, trying to get these other capital projects done first.
really?
Well, there's things they can start right now, isn't there?
Yeah, they got, they got,
I
they
mean,
got
you
stuff.
know,
they
get rid of that
can-
trophies and
They
trophy
gotta do
cases.
the final
and-
cleaning of the
Yeah.
building
Yeah,
yet.
start getting rid of some of that
They've
stuff.
got all that stuff to do yet.
Yeah, so they can paint that lobby, because they talked about putting paint in that lobby, so.
That's one of the things
Yeah.
we'll talk about next Monday, is what the youth
Okay.
hockey wants to do, redo
Yeah.
mainly the lobby is what they wanna focus on with their money.
Okay.
But if we get new fixtures in that bathroom, get a coat of paint, I think just the general cleanliness will look better too, of the whole building.
I just think we gotta keep a tighter reins on Mr. Gibson, that's, you know. That's my opinion.
Well, that's the one thing I'm gonna be interested in seeing is how staff is gonna basically manage the contract and, you know, make sure things get done, so.
And just remind them, you know, if we get complaints, you're done.
We did speak, or I did speak with an architect regarding what triggers the thresholds for becoming totally ADA compliant. The bathroom upgrades that are being discussed now do not trigger that threshold. We would put ADA compliant fixtures in there, but they're just to replace existing fixtures. I did get an opinion also Nick has had a couple things and experiences with this, and he says it wouldn't trigger, and we did talk with Wold Architects. They do a lot of municipal stuff on buildings, city halls, fire departments, ice arenas, so we're not too concerned that we would have to meet any ADA requirements. To remodel the whole thing and lose some fixtures in the bathroom, so we have checked that out. So I think we're in good shape there, and we'll come up with a plan that's gonna show the remedial actions and what we're gonna do going forward to make sure that there are no repeats of what we had last year.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Nope.
All right. Move on to item 4, the 2023-27 roads capital improvement plan. Nate?
City staff prepares an annual capital improvement plan which updates projected projects, evaluates priorities, and establishes funding for these works for the coming year and for each of the subsequent years over a 5-year period. The plan is presented to the city council for their approval and used for preparing the coming year's budget. Approval of the plan only commits the city to the projects listed for 2023. Attached is Exhibit 1, or exhibit as Attachment 1 is the draft 23 to 2027 road CIP as proposed by city staff. The starting balances for 2023 reflect the anticipated costs for all those 2022 road construction projects, including the reconstruction of 181st Avenue, the Shenandoah, Shawnee Woods, and Pine Grove Estates overlays, and the North Metro Joint Powers maintenance projects. The plan requires a proposed general fund transfer of $500,000 into the street capital fund for 2023, which is consistent with the 2022 transfer. A negative balance in the municipal state aid account is not an indication of too many projects, but the need for numerous projects that can be funded within the regulations established by MnDOT. The city can advance fund for projects not to exceed the limit of up to 4 times the annual construction allotment, or $3 million, whichever is less. Our current projected annual allotment from the state of Minnesota is $663,231. Attachment 1 is the breakdown of the two budgets that we were proposing, and then I've included a map there for you tonight of the project locations. And if you want, we can just go through them. So the first page there is the Municipal State Aid Fund. For 2023, we're proposing a joint project with the city of Oak Grove for the reconstruction of University Avenue. This project's been in discussion with their city for a number of years now. We're anticipating around $1 million cost for that project, with our share being $500,000. It shows an initial balance of negative balance starting in 2023 of negative $339,000. So that is after we funded the 181st project, which we had the construction pre-con meeting for today. They're actually going to start tomorrow on that project, and they're planning on getting done within a little over a month. So it's going to be a quick project. And we've advance funded, so this year's 2022's allotment, 2023's allotment, and a portion of 2024's allotment. So that's where the 0 and the 462,000. That is for that 181st project and the Sand Hill Parkway project. So we've already kind of advance funded. It's kind of a weird way to show the accounting for it. But after that, we started getting back that balance built back up with our annual allotment of $663,000 as you go forward. But as we mentioned, you can advance fund up to 4 times this amount, and it's a good way to leverage our money to get projects done that need to be done when construction costs are lower. Each year they go up, because they've been going up every year a lot of money. And there's no interest charged to us to advance fund this, so it's basically we're borrowing free money from our future accounts to pay for these. For 2024, we have the Davenport Street reconstruction. This would be the piece coming off of Sims Road by the post office and then going south to the arena, redoing that whole section there. It'd be a reconstruction to match the existing curb and gutter that's on the arena road and the post office. And then after that, we don't have anything proposed. We can be flexible if service road projects come up, or we can start building that fund back up if we want, get that balance back up closer to 0.
On this, question I have is, it seems like Davenport's been on this list for a long time. are we shifting that year to year?
It has been pushed down, yes.
Um, That road's in rough shape. It has
Right.
been for a while, so university's a higher priority than Davenport?
Part of the problem with these border roads is getting both cities to get everything lined up. So once we kind of get them in place, we try not to move them too much.
Okay,
We had the same problem with Ham Lake. 181st got kicked down a bunch of
remember
years, so
that,
everybody
yeah.
we got both cities lined up with their funding. I'd say both of them are in equally poor shape. University was actually on there longer, but once the city worked with the county and the state to redo the stoplight at 221st, that priority for that chunk of University, the traffic counts went way down because a lot of people would go up to Sims Road to get out to the highway rather than come up to 221st.
Hmm.
So that kind of kicked this down, and as these service roads have come up, we've kind of, some of these have been pushed down too.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
I don't understand how we operate with negative numbers, so that
It-
just blows me
It's
away.
not actually negative, it's a different way to, there's different ways we could show. We could show that we're positive and then we have nothing coming in 25, 26, as we advance fund it. So instead of being negative $1 million in 2024, we could take the advance funding from 2020,
Oh, okay.
25 and 26, that would be zeroed out,
It's like having an IRA and we can't get to it until 2025.
right?
So I kind of, you said something about Sand Hill, that we had to pay for it out of the budget, but I thought we used other monies for Sand Hill.
We got a $3.2 million grant, and we also advance funded from this municipal state aid fund, 1.8 million. There were no city funds used on that for the road.
Okay,
And
So
that,
that came out of this one.
that's why we have the beginning negative balance, because of the Sand Hill Parkway project and the 181st Avenue project.
okay.
Which is this year.
Yes,
And just the state aid money is given, or not given to it, it comes from the state. It's based off of your fuel taxes and things like that. Each city gets an allotment. That number changes from year to year. We're using 663, that's what we have this year. Last year it actually went down because the traffic counts went down with the pandemic, but this year it's going back up again. It's based on the number of cars on some of our roads is how they help decide who gets how much money, so.
So now with these MSA projects, like going on, these are all gonna be no parking on the roads, correct?
yes.
Like or University and then, Davenport,
signs.
once they
Without-
do all them,
Without making them wider, they have to be no
they'll
parking.
be all no parking, okay.
We can make them parking, but we have to pay extra money from our own account
Okay,
to make
okay.
them wider. The state won't cover that.
Okay.
Can't use, it's not eligible for those costs. Yep. Yeah, so that was a requirement, there's no parking, the stop signs on the Sand Hill Crane on the 90-degree there, that was a requirement from this money because of the corner was so sharp that it didn't meet the 30-mile-per-hour curve. So once we're done with,
They're
those can maybe be
using the wrong
changed.
car to go around the corner. I don't know anything about it. Okay,
So we have some flexibility going forward for 25, 26 and beyond,
Yeah.
if projects come up. Most of our existing MSA roads are in okay shape. We'll have to start looking at doing maybe some overlays on some of them going forward. Briarwood could maybe use an overlay in a few years. It's getting a lot of block cracking on that, so.
Well, one thing I'd like to have you look at too is, I don't know what, if you're doing a street capital or whatever, is up on north of 229th, up towards Fish Lake Nature Trail, up that area, up Durant.
Yeah.
Some of them roads up in there are really bad. I was up there last week and
Oh, in the
some roads that are
neighborhood?
falling apart up there.
In the neighborhood there?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything on any of these. I mean, somewhere down the line.
We don't have Carlisle addition on the plan. We can go to the next one if you want, Jack. So the second page is our street capital fund. This is funded from the transfer from the general fund. For 2022, that's shown on the map that you have there. Those are the ones that they'll be coming possibly to council next week for approval. Craig's putting together the design for that. We're doing 3 neighborhood overlays. Those are shown in red on the map. It's Shawnee Woods, Shenandoah Estates, and Pine Grove Estates. So for 2023, we are proposing the $200,000 for our maintenance projects. We've been able to keep those costs down quite a bit, so that's generally gonna be cheaper than what it shows on there. The Northern Oaks Cooper Lake Estates is the neighborhood adjacent to John Anderson Park. So that would just get a straight overlay in there. Pine Oak Crossing is a neighborhood down on the south end, just into, off of Briarwood going out to Greenbrook Drive. And then the other one was 183rd, which is gonna be kind of an expensive one because of the poor soils in there. That has a high traffic count and goes down from Greenbrook Drive down to Lakeview Point on the west end of Coon Lake
Are we
there.
gonna do anything to widen that at all?
We can see what it's gonna cost. The problem is the swamps on both sides down there. I think part of it's Corduroy Road, which is buried logs that the road floats on.
Oh,
We discovered that when we put a culvert in there. So we'll have to see the engineering estimates on that. That one might have some, might be more money than we're
I
planning.
know last time we did that road, we talked about doing it too. It's difficult.
So that's for 2023, and then going forward, we've listed a number of developments for basically overlay with, none of these are total reconstructions at this time. The big one there is Breezy Point, Edmar, Vickers, that whole neighborhood in there is really starting to fall apart. Further down, we've got a couple neighborhoods right behind City Hall here off of Sandy Drive. 2026 is Sunset Drive. That is a street capital project with Linwood. And in 2027 is overlays for both of the Hidden Haven developments that have a number of drainage issues in there that will be corrected.
So
Okay, any
if some of
questions?
these roads get really bad before, like if 2025, the London or one of those streets, I mean, huge pothole just because of bad winter, a lot of snow, plows tear it up. Do you move stuff around then and
Yes, yep.
just add it to?
We do this plan every year and we've moved stuff around, even on this one from last year, to prioritize the ones that are the worst. So right now, basically, we're only approving what's gonna go through in 2023. And then that'll come before council again when the project is actually bid for them to approve at that time again. But yeah, we can, every year we'll go through the same process, and if there's ones that need to be moved around, we can move them around. If council's got anything to recommend, we can add it or move stuff around in this one too.
And if something happens in 2023 where we need a road fixed, do you bring it to council and,
That's not in the plan.
yeah?
Yeah, we could definitely do that. We can deviate from, if we wanna add stuff, if we have funding and the council approves it, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Nate on this? Assume this will be on next council
Yes.
agenda? Okay. All right. Thank you, Nate. Item 5, telecommuting discussion and policy consideration.
A request was made by City Council Member Harrington that council discuss the work-at-home schedule that is currently in place for City Hall. This discussion will address the consideration that all employees working from home return to the office full-time. As part of this conversation, it is recommended that council include a revised policy for working remotely to update the approved plan that was instituted at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our work-from-home assignments were in response to Governor Walz's COVID mandate in March of 2020 that strongly encouraged working remotely. This general policy was designed to separate and isolate employees to the extent possible for the safety of staff and to ensure the continuity of city services, as most staff that were working remotely to their regular office hours. The exception to the total in-person staff of the office are for one position that is currently suited for working at home 1 day work from home per week for 2 staff members, and limited work from home requests for quarantines, child care needs, or other matters approved by the city administrator. In your packet, there's a status of the work from home positions, those that are full-time, 1 day a week, those that have worked from home, and those that have not worked from home. Should council decide to return all staff in person and on a Monday through Friday working hours, there will be some times when there will be a need for certain staff to work remotely. To address these situations, council should consider adopting a policy for working at home. Staff has checked with surrounding cities, and 6 of the 7 surveys have adopted policies for or allow working from home with conditions. These policies are general in nature and are exhibited in attachment 1, which is in your packet. The reason we bring this up is we do feel there are certain situations where staff is needed to work from home in relative to having to be home for certain needs such as childcare when projects are due and they would have to take the day off. They could work from home to finish those up in inclement weather when they might not be able to get in and there are deadlines to meet for their work or for other needs. What we checked with Wyoming, Blaine, Isani, St. Francis, Cambridge, Ham Lake, and Oak Grove, and found that every one of those, with the exception of the city of Wyoming, has remote work policies. Most of them, as you can see in your packet, are very general. There's also in your packet a sample template for a work at home policy and a work at home agreement. Currently, as I said before, we have 1 staff member that essentially works from home full-time with the exception that they do come in as required and as needed. We have 2 staff members that work from home 1 day a week, and we have 5 staff members who have worked from home on a limited basis, and then our public-facing employees have not worked from home, such as a receptionist, permit clerk, building official, building inspector, fire chief, and fire inspector. Our public works manager is included in that, although he did work from home 1 day to take a continuing education class. But the other people that work from home, it's been very limited, and it's been based on their own personal needs to satisfy basically childcare or attending to someone that was sick in their home. So I would think that we would not want to do a total blanket, everybody has to work at the office, but there should be some considerations and exceptions for working at home on a limited basis. And if you want to us to come up with a policy for that, we'll be more than happy to follow that with your direction. We could have that by the May 23rd council meeting for any consideration, if that's the choice or the direction you want to proceed.
Comments?
Well, I'm the one that requested this. My reasoning, the pandemic's in a low right now, and we should have people here. I mean, there's issues with phones not getting answered, not returning phone calls, and I feel there should be people here picking that up. And if I need information, I shouldn't have to go to you all the time. I should be able to go to one of them and get my information. So that's why I feel that everybody should be, you know, I can see an exception if they
Yeah.
have to work from home, but I feel they should be here at City Hall.
I think if it's a continuing childcare thing, they need to find a childcare help for that. If it's an occasional, you know, once a month, once a quarter, something like that, you can understand. That's kind of what we used to have to take leave for when I was working. If I had childcare issues, if there's somebody sick in the household, isn't there a family sick leave kind of thing that they can apply for and be on a sick leave. But I think people should come to work. I think this is very liberal. I do think that, once in a while, yes, but not on a regular scheduled every Monday, every Friday. I think that's very lax, and I think that our taxpayers are funding this, and they shouldn't be funding people to work from home.
Well, our experience with the working from home is those people have gotten their work done. I agree that, we probably should look at the policy and probably make some adjustments in it, but I would still hope we could keep some options open because there are certain situations that come up that sometimes we need to get some work done. We're a small staff, and if you can do it from home and you have to be home, it certainly helps everybody out.
Well, that's a little different than having one day a week off or being
Yeah.
at home permanently. Remind me again what their leave is? What do they get for leave? How many vacation, how many whatever?
Sick leave, 12 days per year,
So that's one a month.
1 day a month. Vacation, 0 to 5 years is 2 weeks. 5 to 10, or 6 to 11 is 3 weeks. After 11 is 4 weeks.
Okay, and is there any other, well, how many holidays?
There are 11 paid holidays, and employees can purchase a week's
Another
extra
week.
vacation.
And I feel that's pretty liberal to be able to cover this. My issues are, the phone is just, I'm sorry, but the phone is not getting answered. I'm calling in and the phone isn't getting answered. And when you have, in one department, you have a 4-day lapse in there where you don't communicate. I mean, you communicate by phone, but one's off on a Friday and one's off on a Monday.
Well,
And when you were hired to work Monday through Friday in the office. You weren't hired to have a telecommute day.
but I think we need to keep in mind, that these aren't days off.
They're days
Leaves
working
and
from
sicks,
home.
It's just where they're working
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, but I think they're getting minimal stuff done working from home
How do you know that?
because things aren't happening.
How,
People aren't getting aren't getting phone calls back. People
They-
aren't getting the things they request in a timely manner. Things are taking too long.
and you think that's a factor of,
Yeah.
because they're not in the office?
And it's-
Because
some of
their
it
phone,
is.
when they're working remotely, their phones are transferred to their
Correct.
other phone, right? So I won't know whether they're in the office. If I call Stephanie, I wouldn't know if she's in the office or whether she's at home. It's just a matter of whether or not she answers the phone. I just don't want, can't get the picture, these aren't days off. I mean, I'm speaking for someone who worked from
Yeah.
home before COVID. I mean, you're still working. You still have work you have to do. I mean, it's not a day off. There's benefits to working home, there's no doubt, to the employee, but that's the trick, that was the concern for a long time, even before COVID, is you let people work at home, how do you make sure they're working? You know,
Well, and I don't think it's so much how do you make sure they're working, we wouldn't have hired them if we didn't have a trust in them. I think it's more, you can't have half of your department off working at home. If I was in here on a Friday afternoon, Jack was gone, our finance manager was gone, Carrie was gone, Aaron was gone. It was like a ghost town in here. And I needed something done, and I knew who to go to. Our customers come to the front, and there's no one in there. It says to go to the back. You go to the back, there's no one sitting there. You press the buzzer, and you wait, which is literally what I did, what I had to do, because I don't have access. So if it's happening to me, it's happening to other people. So if we're gonna have a policy, then we need a policy where maybe it's one person is off at a time. You know, it's got to be something better than what we have now. And the phones are the big thing. You know, they're not getting answered. That's my personal history. And when they do get answered and you leave messages for people, they're not being returned in what I would consider a reasonable amount of time.
And I agree that's something we have to address.
Yeah, but we
But-
hired them
but-
because we trust them, and so that's not my issue.
But do you agree that that issue is kind of irregardless of whether they're in the office or not? They got the call, they haven't returned their call.
No, I think it has something to do with them not being in the office also. Because it is much easier if I am at work and my phone is sitting right here on my desk, I'm going to answer that because everybody in the office can hear it ringing. If I'm at home and my phone's ringing and I'm put a load of laundry in, I'm not necessarily answering it. And I also worked from home. And yes, there is a great benefit to it. And yes, you can get your work done in a lot fewer hours. But we're a very small staff and we need to be up in front of I mean, we work for this city. I think we need to be up in front of them. You know, our public works people can't work from home. Our fire department can't work from home, well, in essence. It is a great privilege, but I think we've gone too far the other way with the privilege.
I'm not sure if it was done as a privilege, it was done for COVID.
It was done for
But it's
COVID, but it's turned into a
Well,
privilege.
Yeah, it's in the conversation now of how we deal with it, so. But having a consistent policy is what we need. Yeah, I agree with that.
And once again, no one was hired saying you can work from home on this, or this. Everybody was hired for the 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. And our offices are open 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. And I would expect, my expectation would be somebody would be here that would greet me, be able to help me and not say, ooh, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. XYZ is the only other person who knows how to do that and they're not here.
Exactly, or if somebody has a question and they need to communicate, each job interacts with another job in here, in there, and they need to communicate with each other. And if somebody needs something and they have to call somebody and they leave a message and they don't get back and then they forget about it because all these other things start coming in, they need to be up here. They need to be able to interact with each other and get stuff answered just like that, rather than wait.
So should staff write up a policy then, present it to us?
That would be your call, Jack. Do you want staff to write up what they think a fair policy is? Or are you gonna write up a fair policy?
I think I'll write it up and consult with them.
Well, when I say
Yeah,
staff, I
yeah.
Yes, being
Jack.
you.
I think that would be the real start of our discussion, is to see what everyone thinks a fair policy is and go from there.
Yeah, 'cause we
But-
can modify it once
yeah.
it comes to us.
And you know, I think everybody makes valid points. The only other thing is that working from home is not the exception anymore. It's becoming somewhat more the norm for certain positions that are suited for working at home. And we have some positions here where working from home is not possible. I know I worked from home for approximately 5 to 6 weeks back December through January.
Well, you had extenuating circumstances which we can work with,
Yeah,
and you came back.
I understand. My point is I hated it. You know, I would come in here early in the mornings and then go home and finish the rest of the day, but it was periodic, answering calls, returning emails. But there are some positions, and I don't think that mine was really one of them, that, you know, are suited from working from home. There is one position we have that is, you know, it's ideal for working at home. But again, I think let's just develop a policy and a draft, and we'll see where we can go from there with it.
Well, and I will make a comment on the one that's ideal for working from home. It is currently ideal, but when you start splitting that department up and you have another person who is in that department, it may not be as ideal because the new person's gonna have to ask for help.
Yeah, and in that particular case, though, that person will be in a lot more. She'll be doing a lot of training for that person, so.
So, you know, there's extenuating
yeah.
circumstances to all of it. But,
You have no direction?
Yes.
All right, on to our last item.
Item 6, Finley Broadband Internet Report. At the March 21st, 2022 EDA meeting, Chris Konechny of Finley Engineering gave a presentation summarizing the broadband gap analysis report. Attachment 1 in your packet is the executive summary and findings. Some of the summary highlights include the identification of the current broadband gaps in the city. These include the gap as there are 313 homes and businesses that don't currently have fast broadband. However, 125 of those locations are scheduled to get fiber broadband, which leaves 188 passings that aren't served by 100/20 megabytes per second broadband today. However, due to the FCC definition of served areas, there are pockets in the city that, while identified as being served, may have no access or speeds that do not meet the 2020 requirements of 25.3. I'd like to go over those real quick. In 2015, prior to 2015, the federal communication requirement for broadband areas that were served was 4 megabytes download, 1 megabyte upload. That was changed in 2015 to 25 download and 3 upload. The new current standard, which is going to go into effect soon, there is no date for it, is 120 download and 20 megs upload. So that thing is changing. One of the problems that the report identified too was the fact that the FCC defined service as being one house in a census block that was served meant that the whole area was considered served. Now, that brings up a problem with what's a census block? I'm going to keep this at a small scale first. This is Menard Lake. The red lines define a census block. So you can see there's one census block here. It's a huge area, maybe 160, maybe 300 acres. Within that, though, there's several smaller blocks. So if just one house within this larger area is served, even though there's Fillmore Street, parts of 241st, Skylark Drive, Monroe Street, a little part of Pierce Path, if one house is served with the 25.3 definition, that means that Midco or the ISP can color this whole block in as being served.
And we know that's not true in that particular area.
That's true.
is it just one house or could it be residential or businesses too?
It could probably be, I think it's defined as one residential unit, but it probably could be business too. I don't have the exact thing, but just even what it is, if just one is served and meets that requirement. Also too, the FCC allows marketing speeds to be used as what the ISP provides. So when you see them doing that, they'll say speeds up to.
Up to.
25 megabytes per second, or download up to 3 megabytes per second. So the FCC's requirements for defining served and unserved is really very inaccurate and overstates the whole issue of what areas are served. So from what we got and discussed at the EDA was there's probably many, many pockets within these census blocks that do not meet this definition. And probably what our challenge is going forward is to find out where they are, and that's what the Findlay people are going to address when they come here on the 16th, is what are our next steps and how do we handle this? So there's a real problem in defining what's served and unserved to be real accurate, so there's probably going to have to be some more in-depth work and other survey work done to prove that. The biggest problem is that these definitions are what has to be met to obtain federal grant funds. So with the way it is now, and if you look at some of the maps, this is Midco's service area. So even though they show that they serve most of the city, there's these larger census blocks within the city, and there's many, many large ones that if you took them out, this would be quite a reduced area that shows service. So I think that's one of the big questions that's coming out of this report, and one of the things that we need to identify going forward that we need to comment on, and some of the questions that we have gotten from the EDA about how to address this matter. And Findlay's going to try to answer those when they do their final presentation. Also, Findlay provided a cost to build out what it would take to service the city with fiber. Now, that's part of what was looked at or requested from the RFP, but also, too, was a question, okay, there are some areas that will probably never be served by fiber, but there may be other alternatives to address those, like certain fixed wireless providers, low orbiting satellite service, things of this nature. So that'll be another thing that we'll discuss with them when they provide their final report. So the EDA, Findlay will be at the EDA meeting on March the 16th. And at the next council meeting, we will request council call a special meeting to meet with the EDA to receive this presentation. So what I'm requesting now is if the council has any questions they would like to forward on to Findlay to have addressed and answered prior to the meeting, or have them address them at the presentation, that we can submit them. If you don't have them, if something comes up and you want to give that to me, I can send them in end of the week or first of next week, and we can get those on the list. I did attach some of the questions that came from the EDA. I thought they were very, very good questions. And I think that too, one of the big questions is, how do we address this fact that even though we show service in all the city, we know that not everyone gets those speed requirements? And how do we address that? What's our next step going forward on that? And also, what happens too when this definition of service is changed from 100 megabytes download, 20 megabytes upload, and replaces the 25.3 standard that's there now? This map will totally change. So I think those are the primary concerns and questions that I have with the report. I think the report was very thorough and gave a lot of good information. After I read that, I knew more about broadband than I thought I'd ever know, and I still don't know a lot, but I thought it was very thorough and gave some good background information and analyzed some things very thoroughly. So I think we'll come out of this with identifying what our next steps are going to be to address some of the situations, and Also too, we did have a business survey in there, which we worked with them. We got help from the chamber, and Wanda helped us out quite a bit, and I followed up on several things, on some responses, and I think the biggest issue we had with businesses, the primary one was from the two banks. They have the most need for constant, dependable internet because that's how all their transactions are essentially handled. Also, retail establishments. I remember when we were working on the service road project on Central Avenue in 2017, when we did the upgrade to that road down there, that the excavators hit the internet line and knocked Highway 65 Pub and Grub's service out. And I got a call from them saying, we're dead in the water. We can't do any business at all because everything is tied to credit cards. We can't process credit cards unless we have internet. So it's a huge issue, and I just think we're on the first steps of addressing it, and it's gonna be a longer process, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. Currently, even though it's not encouraging for federal grant funds because of the way the FCC defines that eligibility, you know, the county does have the program too, where we can get $150,000 in the grant. We'd have to match it 50-50. And there's probably other monies in that because I don't think there's too many cities have signed up to use it yet. So I do think that we have an opportunity to work with Midco. Our relations with them have improved drastically. We've got some good contacts with them, and I think that our future and way to improve this is to partner with Midco to see what we can come up with. Hopefully these other standards change for the definition of service, and we'll just have to move it forward one step at a time.
So Jack, at the last Sunrise Business meeting, Samantha from the county talked about the fact that their county's gonna basically do the same thing we just did. But they're gonna go a step further, and they're gonna do direct mailing out to residents. Have you heard anything with status of that?
No, I haven't. I know that the firm that the county hired, Design 9, also did Isani County's
Okay.
broadband plan. And they did a direct mailing to essentially all the residents in the county that they knew didn't have internet service. They probably excluded Cambridge, Isani areas. And that was the way they determined some of their needs. Now, theirs were a lot, probably less than ours because there's not much, any type of service there. I do want to contact Rhonda and see what, Samantha's last day, I believe, is the 13th. We'll reach out to her to see if she has any final parting words on that, but I do know they're doing their interviews with their candidates now for her replacement. I'd like to get them on board and meet with them as soon as possible. But that might be our next step, is a direct mailing to residents or areas of the city that we suspect don't have good service or no service.
Well, and I would assume the county would hit those people. They're not gonna exclude us because we've already had our survey.
We haven't done a survey.
I mean,
No, yeah.
because we've already had our report. I don't think they'll
No,
exclude
no,
us, so they should hit our customers.
We'll coordinate with them, and hopefully maybe they can do, I don't know if they're gonna do it all at once, or they're gonna do it in stages, or how they're gonna perform that, but maybe we could convince them if they're gonna do it in certain stages, they could do us first.
It'll be interesting to see what the response rate was for Sandy County when they did it.
It was approximately 20%, which is
That's
pretty
pretty
good
good.
for a mail survey.
That's really good for a mail survey on something they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
What we need is a map that shows which parcels aren't served, not which census tracts. So I don't know how we ever do that, but
Midco's got to have one.
Midco's, oh, they do. They just won't give it to us, that's all, so.
Midco does have very detailed maps on where all their service lines are, and we met with them here, probably is about a year, it was right about the time COVID started. And they came here and we had a great discussion with them. And they pulled up some of their information, and I mean, it's very detailed maps, you know, they have line types where it's fiber, cable, whatever, node
Yep.
They
sizes.
know where their assets are at, so.
And I asked them if we could get a copy of that map, and they said, no, that's
Proprietary.
proprietary information.
Because you could turn around and give it
Even
to
though they're the
Century
only
Link.
provider we allow,
Yeah.
but it's proprietary. so.
Now, again, you look at these maps and they show that other people are doing internet service provision in the city, which is probably true to some extent, but it's not available. I did check with Comcast.
What'd they say?
Well, I couldn't get anybody directly, so I called them up and I said, I'm inquiring about service availability for 20675 Highway
Highway
65,
65.
which is the ice arena.
Yeah.
So after probably about 30 minutes of getting switched back and forth, they said, we don't have any service in that area.
So that's one question I asked Finley. is
Yeah,
where's-
that is, and I'm not sure what they got that information from, but, or how it was determined, but, we do know that there's no Comcast service at the ice arena. It's not
Well,
available.
it's, I think it's somewhat important to determine whether that's real or not, because you see it on social media all the time, people asking what their options are, and everyone's asking for Comcast. Well, if this gets out and says there is Comcast in the city, then we're gonna
Yeah.
confuse a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of the things we need
Yeah.
to just nail down and say, well,
Mm.
this map says this, but
Yeah.
no, they're not really here, so.
I thought another interesting aspect of the study was when they were describing those that do actually provide service now, particularly CenturyLink, is the fact that, you know, CenturyLink's basically wire service and copper degrades in the ground, and they're probably may not be interested in coming back and improving that.
Redoing it.
So the point on that is, and I'm sure you read it, was, you know, Midco could become a monopoly, but most of these utility companies are monopolies anyway. That are regulated in some form or another, but I thought that was a kind of an interesting concept and discussion point.
So you want questions from us by the end of the week?
If you have any questions, you know, if you can do that, I'll get them submitted, and then Finley can address them, and we'll go from there, and then we'll receive their presentation and be ready to take the next step.
I will make a recommendation, if you did not watch the EDA meeting where the EDA had their discussion, I would recommend it, because they brought up a lot of things that even reading through half of this, I didn't understand, but once they started discussing it, it made a little more sense. It was a really good discussion.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Yeah, you were sitting here, but I watched it after you said that. I watched it online.
Okay. Anything else on this? All right, we're through our agenda.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Our work meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.